In the heart of the Egyptian desert, where golden sands touch the feet of colossal statues, silent witnesses stand to an era unlike any other in human history. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, which ruled from approximately 2686 BCE to 2181 BCE, was a period when Egypt established its civilizational identity, laying the foundations for art, architecture, and religion that would endure for millennia. This era began with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single king, transforming the pharaoh from a mere political ruler into the earthly embodiment of the god Horus. The Third Dynasty, led by Pharaoh Djoser, marked a major turning point in Egyptian architecture. The step pyramid of Saqqara was constructed, not just a royal tomb but an architectural declaration of the new state's power. Imhotep, the mastermind behind this structure, was the first to extensively use stone in construction, moving away from the mud brick common in earlier eras. With the rise of the Fourth Dynasty, the Old Kingdom reached its zenith. The pharaohs of this period left an indelible mark on history. Sneferu, the first king of this dynasty, was a great builder who constructed 3 pyramids, including the Red Pyramid at Djoser, considered Egypt's first true smooth-sided pyramid. His son Khufu went even further, erecting the Great Pyramid of Giza, which took 20 years to build and employed hundreds of thousands of workers, not slaves, as often rumored, but skilled laborers who worked during the slow agricultural seasons. The pyramids were not merely tombs but part of vast funerary complexes that included temples, causeways, and statues. Khafre's pyramid, for example, was connected to the Valley Temple by a raised causeway where offering rituals were performed. The Great Sphinx, with the head of a man and the body of a lion, guarded these complexes, symbolizing the pharaoh's strength and wisdom. Menkaure, the last of the great Fourth Dynasty pharaohs, built a smaller pyramid but distinguished it with finely carved stones and intricate decorations. Inscriptions suggest that his reign saw a shift in religious thought, as the worship of the sun god Ra slightly declined in favor of Osiris, the god of the underworld. By the Fifth Dynasty, significant political and religious changes emerged. The absolute centrality of the pharaoh diminished, and the influence of priests, particularly those of the Sun Temple at Heliopolis, grew. Religious texts, such as the pyramid texts, were inscribed on tomb walls to guide the deceased in their journey to the afterlife. However, by the end of the Sixth Dynasty, signs of decline appeared. The exceptionally long reign of Pepi II, who ascended the throne as a child and ruled for over 90 years, led to the weakening of central administration. The country soon fragmented into smaller states, plunging Egypt into a dark period known as the First Intermediate Period. Yet, the achievements of the Old Kingdom remained a guiding light for Egyptian civilization. The art of sculpture, exemplified by masterpieces like the seated scribe and the statues of Prince Rahatep and his wife, along with the meticulous administrative system seen in the writings of Vizier Tahotep, all stand as testaments to an era that was not just about pyramids but the birth of governance, art, and religious concepts that would endure until the end of pharaonic civilization. The Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt, spanning from approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, stands as one of the most remarkable periods in the history of human civilization, particularly in the realm of architecture. This era, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, witnessed the construction of some of the most enduring and awe-inspiring structures the world has ever seen. The architectural innovations of the Old Kingdom were not merely feats of engineering but also profound expressions of religious belief, political power, and societal organization. The pyramids, temples, and tombs built during this time reflect a civilization that had mastered the arts of planning, labor coordination, and monumental construction. At the heart of the Old Kingdom's architectural legacy are the pyramids, which served as eternal resting places for the pharaohs, the god-kings of Egypt. The most iconic among these is the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu, Cheops, around 2580 to 2560 BCE. This colossal structure, originally standing at 146.6 meters, 481 feet, was the tallest man-made building in the world for over 3,800 years. The precision with which it was constructed remains a subject of admiration and study even today. The alignment of the pyramid with the cardinal points, the intricate internal chambers, and the sheer scale of stone blocks used, each weighing several tons, demonstrate an advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. The construction of the pyramids was not an isolated endeavor but part of a larger architectural and religious complex. Each pyramid was accompanied by a mortuary temple, a valley temple, and a causeway connecting them. These structures were designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, filled with rituals and offerings conducted by priests. The mortuary temple of Khafre, Chefren, for instance, showcases the refined use of granite and limestone, with massive pillars and statues that emphasized the pharaoh's divine authority. The valley temples, often located near the Nile, served as entry points for ceremonial processions, reinforcing the connection between the earthly realm and the divine. Beyond the pyramids, the Old Kingdom also saw the development of mastabas, which were flat-roofed, rectangular tombs with sloping sides. These were the precursors to the pyramids and were primarily used for high-ranking officials and nobles. The mastabas at Saqqara, such as those of the nobles from the 3rd and 4th dynasties, contain elaborate burial chambers and decorated walls depicting scenes of daily life, ensuring the deceased's needs in the afterlife. The artistry within these tombs provides invaluable insights into the culture, economy, and social hierarchy of the Old Kingdom. Another significant architectural achievement was the construction of sun temples, particularly during the 5th dynasty. These temples, dedicated to the sun god Ra, symbolized the pharaoh's role as the intermediary between the gods and the people. The Sun Temple of Nusayr at Abu Ghurab is a prime example, featuring a large obelisk atop a pedestal, an open courtyard for offerings, and intricate reliefs depicting the pharaoh's devotion to Ra. The design of these temples reflected the cosmological beliefs of the time, aligning with the movement of the sun across the sky. The techniques employed by Old Kingdom architects and laborers were groundbreaking. The use of ramps, levers, and sledges to transport massive stone blocks, the precise cutting and fitting of stones without mortar, and the development of sophisticated surveying methods all contributed to the longevity of these structures. The workforce, often consisting of skilled artisans and seasonal laborers, was organized in a highly efficient manner, debunking earlier myths that the pyramids were built by slaves. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that the laborers were well-fed and housed, indicating a society capable of large-scale, state-sponsored projects. The architectural legacy of the Old Kingdom extended beyond mere construction. It influenced Egyptian art, religion, and governance for millennia. The pyramids, in particular, became symbols of eternal power, inspiring later dynasties to emulate their grandeur. Even as the Old Kingdom declined, its architectural principles persisted, evolving into the temples and tombs of the Middle and New Kingdoms. In summary, the Old Kingdom's architectural achievements were unparalleled in their ambition and execution. From the towering pyramids of Giza to the intricate mastabas and sun temples, these structures embodied the spiritual, political, and technological zenith of early Egyptian civilization. They remain standing today not just as relics of the past but as testaments to human ingenuity and the enduring desire to reach for the divine. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, laid the foundation for many aspects of Egyptian civilization that persisted throughout its long history. This period, spanning roughly from 2686 BCE to 2181 BCE, established political, religious, artistic, and cultural norms that influenced subsequent eras, including the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and even later periods of foreign rule. The legacy of the Old Kingdom can be seen in the continuity of divine kingship, architectural achievements, bureaucratic systems, religious doctrines, and artistic conventions that defined Egypt for millennia. One of the most significant influences of the Old Kingdom was the concept of divine kingship. The pharaoh was not just a political ruler but also a god on earth, a belief that became deeply embedded in Egyptian ideology. This idea was reinforced by the construction of monumental pyramids, particularly those at Giza, which served as both tombs and symbols of the pharaoh's eternal power. Later periods, even when pyramid building declined, maintained the notion of the pharaoh as a divine intermediary between the gods and the people. The New Kingdom pharaohs, for example, emphasized their divine connection through temple constructions and elaborate burial practices in the Valley of the Kings, adapting Old Kingdom traditions to new forms. Architectural innovations from the Old Kingdom set standards for future generations. The precision and grandeur of the Great Pyramid of Khufu remained unmatched, but the techniques developed during this era were refined and adapted. The use of stone masonry, the alignment of structures with celestial bodies, and the symbolic layout of temples and tombs all stemmed from Old Kingdom practices. Later temples, such as those at Karnak and Luxor, incorporated design elements that echoed the pyramid complexes, albeit in different forms. The persistence of mastaba tombs in noble burials and the evolution into rock-cut tombs demonstrated how Old Kingdom burial customs evolved rather than disappeared. The bureaucratic system established during the Old Kingdom also had a lasting impact. The vizier, as the highest-ranking official, became a permanent fixture in Egyptian administration. The division of the kingdom into nomes, governed by appointed officials, ensured centralized control, a system that was revived and modified in the Middle Kingdom after the instability of the First Intermediate Period. The meticulous record-keeping, tax collection, and labor organization seen in Old Kingdom projects like pyramid construction set precedents for later administrations. Religious beliefs from the Old Kingdom permeated future periods. The pyramid texts, the oldest known religious compositions, were inscribed in royal tombs and later evolved into the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead. These spells and rituals ensured the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, a concept that expanded to include non-royal individuals in later times. The worship of major deities such as Ra, Osiris, and Horus, which gained prominence in the Old Kingdom, remained central to Egyptian religion. Osiris, in particular, grew in importance as the god of the dead, with his cult enduring well into the Greco-Roman period. Artistic conventions established in the Old Kingdom persisted with remarkable consistency. The use of hierarchical scale, where the pharaoh was depicted larger than other figures, remained a standard. Statuary followed strict proportions and idealized forms, a tradition that continued even during the Amarna period's brief deviation. The canonical poses, such as the striding statue or the seated scribe, originated in the Old Kingdom and were replicated for centuries. Economically, the Old Kingdom's reliance on agricultural surplus and state-controlled labor influenced later economic policies. The Middle Kingdom's emphasis on regional development and the New Kingdom's expansionist policies both drew upon the Old Kingdom's model of resource management. Trade expeditions to Nubia and the Levant, first organized during the Old Kingdom, set patterns for future international relations. Even in times of decline, such as the First Intermediate Period, the memory of the Old Kingdom served as a golden age that later rulers sought to restore. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs consciously revived Old Kingdom art styles and titles to legitimize their rule. The New Kingdom, though more militaristic, still looked back to the pyramid builders as cultural ancestors. The Old Kingdom's influence extended beyond Egypt's borders. Neighboring civilizations, such as the Nubians and later the Greeks, admired and imitated Egyptian architecture and art, spreading Old Kingdom-inspired motifs across the Mediterranean and Africa. The Ptolemaic and Roman rulers of Egypt, though foreign, adopted pharaonic traditions to gain legitimacy, proving the enduring power of Old Kingdom symbolism. In summary, the Old Kingdom's contributions to Egyptian civilization were not confined to its time but became the bedrock upon which later periods built. From divine kingship to monumental architecture, from religious texts to bureaucratic efficiency, the legacy of the Old Kingdom shaped Egypt's identity for thousands of years. Even after its decline, the ideals and achievements of this formative era continued to inspire, adapt, and endure, making it one of the most influential periods in ancient history. In the dawn of ancient Egyptian history, when human civilization was taking its first steps toward organization and prosperity, the name Imhotep emerged as one of the greatest minds ever witnessed by Egypt and the entire world. Imhotep was a multi-talented figure, combining medicine, architecture, priesthood, and politics, making him the cornerstone of King Djoser's reign, the second king of the Third Dynasty during the Old Kingdom period. When Djoser ascended to the throne, Egypt was undergoing a major transformation, as the pharaoh sought to unify northern and southern Egypt not only politically but also culturally and religiously. Here, Imhotep rose as the king's vizier and close advisor, possessing an insightful vision that helped establish the foundations of a centralized state. Imhotep was not merely an administrative official but an architect of a new ideology, introducing advanced administrative concepts that improved tax collection and the organization of public projects. However, the greatest achievement that immortalized Imhotep's name in history was his design and construction of the step pyramid at Saqqara, the first massive stone structure in human history. This pyramid was not just a tomb for King Djoser but an expression of an entire philosophy combining religion and architecture. Imhotep designed the pyramid as a staircase upon which the pharaoh would ascend to the heavens to join the gods, reflecting the significant evolution in Egyptian religious beliefs at the time. In the field of medicine, Imhotep is considered the first known physician in history, leaving behind precise medical records describing treatments for various diseases, some of which still amaze scientists today. The Egyptians revered him to such an extent that they deified him as a god of healing after his death, demonstrating the profound impact he had on Egyptian society. Additionally, Imhotep played a pivotal role in reinforcing King Djoser's status as a divine ruler. He organized religious rituals and strengthened the idea of the king's connection to the gods, contributing to the stability of the kingdom and solidifying the ruling dynasty's legitimacy. In short, Imhotep was the mastermind behind many of the achievements that distinguished Djoser's reign, making him a legendary figure that transcended time, with his legacy enduring for thousands of years. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, was a period of profound religious and cultural development that laid the foundation for one of the most enduring spiritual systems in human history. The religious beliefs of this era were deeply intertwined with the natural world, the cosmos, and the divine authority of the pharaoh, setting them apart from the religious systems of contemporary civilizations such as Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and early Chinese societies. Unlike the warlike and unpredictable gods of Mesopotamia or the nature-centric but less centralized deities of the Indus Valley, the gods of the Old Kingdom were part of a meticulously structured pantheon that reinforced the stability and order of the universe, concepts encapsulated in the principle of Ma'at. In Mesopotamia, the gods were often seen as capricious and demanding, requiring constant appeasement through rituals and sacrifices to prevent calamity. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, portrays deities who act on whims, sending floods or curses without clear moral justification. In contrast, the gods of the Old Kingdom, such as Ra, Osiris, and Horus, operated within a more predictable framework, where their actions were tied to the maintenance of cosmic balance. The sun god Ra's daily journey across the sky symbolized not just the cycle of day and night but also the eternal renewal of life, a concept that provided Egyptians with a sense of security and continuity absent in the more volatile Mesopotamian worldview. Another key distinction was the role of the pharaoh as the intermediary between gods and humans. In Egypt, the king was not merely a representative of the gods but was himself considered divine, a living embodiment of Horus. This divine kingship was unparalleled in other ancient civilizations. Mesopotamian rulers, though often claiming divine favor, were not worshipped as gods, and in the Indus Valley, evidence of centralized kingship is scarce, suggesting a more decentralized or possibly theocratic governance. The Chinese Shang dynasty, while deeply religious, viewed their rulers as descendants of the gods rather than gods themselves, emphasizing ancestral worship rather than the pharaoh's direct divinity. The afterlife was another domain where Old Kingdom beliefs diverged significantly. Egyptian religion placed immense importance on the preservation of the body and the journey through the Duat, the underworld, where the deceased would face judgment before Osiris. Elaborate tomb constructions, mummification, and the pyramid texts all served to ensure the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife. By comparison, Mesopotamian beliefs about the afterlife were far gloomier. The dead were thought to descend into a dark, joyless underworld called Urkala, with no hope of resurrection or reward. The Indus Valley civilization's views on the afterlife remain unclear due to the undeciphered script, but burial practices suggest some form of belief in an afterlife or ancestor veneration. Early Chinese ancestor worship also focused on maintaining harmony between the living and the dead but lacked the detailed cosmology of Egyptian funerary practices. Furthermore, the Old Kingdom's religious architecture, most notably the pyramids, reflected a unique fusion of spiritual and political ideology. These monumental structures were not just tombs but also symbols of the pharaoh's eternal power and the god's favor. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats served as temples rather than tombs, functioning as bridges between heaven and earth but not as vessels for the dead. The absence of such grandiose burial complexes in other contemporary civilizations underscores the Egyptian preoccupation with immortality and the divine mandate of their rulers. The concept of Ma'at, truth, balance, and cosmic order, was another defining feature of Old Kingdom religion. This principle governed both the natural and moral worlds, ensuring harmony as long as the pharaoh and priests upheld their duties. Mesopotamian religion lacked an equivalent unifying principle. Their myths often depicted gods in conflict, reflecting the turbulent environment of the Tigris and Euphrates. Similarly, Vedic religion in later India emphasized RTA, cosmic order, but this developed after the Old Kingdom period and was more abstract compared to Egypt's concrete rituals and iconography. While animal worship was present in multiple ancient religions, the Egyptians elevated it to a sophisticated theological level. Deities like Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, and Batet, the feline goddess of home and protection, were not merely symbolic but were believed to manifest in living animals, which were mummified and buried in sacred catacombs. This practice was rare in other cultures. Mesopotamians saw animals primarily as sacrificial offerings, and the Indus Valley seals depict animals but without clear evidence of worship. The priesthood in Old Kingdom Egypt was a highly organized and influential class, managing temples that functioned as economic and spiritual hubs. In contrast, Mesopotamian priests held significant power but were often at the mercy of the ruling elite's demands. The lack of extensive temple complexes in the Indus Valley suggests a different religious structure, possibly more communal or household-based. In summary, the Old Kingdom's religious system was characterized by its emphasis on divine kingship, cosmic order, and the promise of an elaborate afterlife, elements that distinguished it from the more chaotic, human-centric, or ancestor-focused religions of other ancient civilizations. These differences not only shaped Egypt's cultural identity but also ensured the longevity of its spiritual traditions, influencing later religious developments across the Mediterranean and Near East. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, spanning from approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, represents one of the most remarkable periods in ancient history, marked by monumental architectural achievements, centralized governance, and a flourishing economy. The economic conditions of this era were deeply intertwined with the political stability, agricultural prosperity, and administrative efficiency that characterized the rule of the 3rd through 6th dynasties. At the heart of the Old Kingdom's economy was the Nile River, whose annual inundations provided the fertile soil necessary for sustaining large-scale agriculture, which in turn supported the population, the labor force, and the state's vast construction projects. Agriculture was the backbone of the Old Kingdom's economy, with the cultivation of staple crops such as wheat, barley, flax, and various vegetables forming the primary source of sustenance and wealth. The state played a dominant role in overseeing agricultural production, as the pharaoh, believed to be a divine ruler, was considered the ultimate owner of all land. However, in practice, large estates were managed by nobles, temples, and regional administrators who collected surplus produce as taxes, which were then redistributed to fund public works, pay laborers, and maintain the bureaucracy. The system of granaries, controlled by the state, ensured that surplus grain was stored during plentiful years and distributed during times of scarcity, preventing famine and sustaining economic stability. Labor organization was another critical aspect of the Old Kingdom's economy. The construction of the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza under Pharaoh Khufu, required an immense workforce, which was mobilized through a system of conscription known as the corvée labor. Contrary to outdated notions of slave labor, evidence suggests that workers were often peasants who contributed their labor during the Nile's inundation season when farming was impossible. These laborers were compensated with food, clothing, and other goods, indicating a structured economic system capable of managing large-scale projects without collapsing under financial strain. Trade, both internal and external, also played a significant role in the Old Kingdom's economy. Domestically, goods such as grain, pottery, textiles, and tools were exchanged between different regions of Egypt. Externally, the state engaged in long-distance trade with neighboring regions, including Nubia to the south, the Levant to the northeast, and Libya to the west. Expeditions were sent to procure luxury items such as gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and exotic animals, which were used in royal ceremonies, temple offerings, and elite burials. The Palermo Stone, a royal chronicle from the period, records several trading missions, highlighting the importance of commerce in sustaining the kingdom's wealth. Craftsmanship and industry thrived under royal and temple patronage. skilled artisans produced high-quality goods, including jewelry, stone vessels, furniture, and statues, which were often placed in tombs to serve the deceased in the afterlife. The demand for such goods stimulated specialized labor, with workshops operating under the supervision of the state or wealthy nobles. The production of papyrus, used for record-keeping and administrative documents, further indicates the sophistication of the Old Kingdom's economy, as a well-documented bureaucracy was essential for managing resources and maintaining order. Despite its prosperity, the Old Kingdom's economy was not without challenges. The heavy reliance on the Nile's floods meant that any irregularities in the inundation could lead to poor harvests and economic strain. Additionally, the enormous expenditure on pyramid construction and royal monuments, coupled with the growing power of regional governors, nomarchs, eventually contributed to the weakening of central authority. By the end of the Sixth Dynasty, climatic changes, administrative inefficiencies, and political fragmentation led to the decline of the Old Kingdom, ushering in the First Intermediate Period, a time of economic hardship and social upheaval. In summary, the economic conditions of the Old Kingdom were defined by agricultural abundance, state-controlled resource distribution, organized labor systems, and active trade networks. These factors allowed Egypt to achieve unprecedented architectural and cultural advancements, though the overextension of resources and environmental factors ultimately contributed to its decline. The legacy of the Old Kingdom's economy, however, set the foundation for subsequent periods of Egyptian history, demonstrating the resilience and complexity of one of the world's earliest great civilizations. At the heart of ancient Egyptian civilization, the Nile River served as the lifeline that formed the foundation of agricultural and economic prosperity for thousands of years. The Nile's annual floods were a regular natural phenomenon, leaving a profound impact on the soil and farming, making Egypt one of the most fertile regions in the ancient world. At the start of each summer, the Nile's waters would gradually rise due to seasonal rains in the Ethiopian highlands, along with melting snow from the mountains of Ethiopia. By August, the waters would reach their peak, covering vast stretches of land along the riverbanks. By October, the waters would begin to recede, leaving behind a thick layer of black silt rich in minerals and nutrients that naturally renewed the soil's fertility. This silt, known as kemet, black land, was a key secret behind ancient Egypt's high agricultural productivity. It provided fertile soil without the need for artificial fertilizers, allowing farmers to cultivate abundant crops such as wheat, barley, flax, and lentils. This abundance led to significant agricultural surplus, contributing to the growth of cities and the development of Egyptian civilization. However, the floods were not always consistent. In some years, the waters would overflow excessively, destroying villages and crops. In other years, the floods would be weak, leading to famines due to poor harvests. The ancient Egyptians learned to manage these fluctuations by building advanced irrigation systems such as canals and reservoirs, as well as developing an accurate agricultural calendar to predict flood patterns. Additionally, the Nile served as a vital transportation route, facilitating the movement of goods and crops between different regions of Egypt. This strengthened internal and external trade, contributing to the prosperity of the ancient Egyptian economy. The Nile's annual flood formed the foundation of life in Egypt, not only agriculturally but also religiously and culturally. The flood cycle was tied to religious beliefs, as the ancient Egyptians worshipped the god Hapi, who personified the Nile's inundation, offering sacrifices in gratitude for the fertility it brought. In short, the Nile's floods were not merely a natural occurrence but a decisive factor in shaping ancient Egyptian civilization. They provided fertile land, stimulated agricultural innovations, and reinforced economic stability, making Egypt one of the greatest civilizations in history. During the Old Kingdom, which spanned approximately the 3rd millennium BCE, the ancient Egyptian economy relied fundamentally on agriculture, as the fertile lands of the Nile Valley served as a vital source of prosperity and stability. Agricultural efforts centered around key crops that formed the backbone of daily life and the food system of that era. Grains, particularly wheat and barley, held a prominent place among these crops, representing the staple of the Egyptian diet. Farmers cultivated wheat extensively, and it was used to make bread, the primary food for all social classes, while barley was utilized in brewing beer, a common beverage consumed daily and used in religious rituals. Alongside grains, the cultivation of flax flourished, playing a crucial role in the textile industry. Ancient Egypt was renowned for the quality of its linen fabrics, which were used for clothing, bedding, and even wrapping mummies. Flax was grown over vast areas, and its processing required high skill, making it a valuable commodity exported to neighboring regions. Additionally, legumes such as lentils, fava beans, and chickpeas were widely cultivated, providing an essential source of plant-based protein, especially for the poor, who did not always have access to meat. For fruits and vegetables, their cultivation varied according to seasons and water availability. From orchards of figs and pomegranates to fields of onions, garlic, and cucumbers, these crops were grown in home gardens or larger farmlands. Dates, which grew abundantly in oases and along the Nile, were a rich source of natural sugars, making them a fundamental ingredient in sweets and snacks. Agriculture in the Old Kingdom was not limited to food production alone, it also included plants with medicinal and industrial purposes. The cultivation of papyrus, for instance, was essential for manufacturing paper, which was used in administrative records and religious texts. Additionally, certain aromatic plants, such as thyme and myrrh, were employed in embalming and traditional medicine. Thus, the agricultural crops of the Old Kingdom formed an integrated system that supported economic, social, and religious life, contributing to the prosperity of one of the greatest civilizations in human history. The dawn of Egyptian civilization, particularly during the Old Kingdom period, trade underwent significant development, playing a pivotal role in strengthening the economy and expanding the state's influence. Trade mechanisms relied on a complex network of internal and external relations, supported by abundant natural resources and relatively advanced logistical capabilities for that era. On the domestic front, trade primarily depended on a barter system, where essential goods such as grain, linen, and stone tools were exchanged without the use of monetary currency. The Nile served as the lifeline connecting Egypt's various regions, allowing goods to be transported from the south to the north and vice versa with relative ease. The Egyptians used boats made of papyrus or wood to transport goods, while donkeys served as land carriers for smaller commodities. On the external front, Egypt's trade network extended to distant regions such as the Levant, Nubia, and Libya. From the south, the Egyptians imported gold, ivory, and exotic animals from Nubia, while they obtained precious woods like cedar from the mountains of Lebanon, which were used in shipbuilding and temple construction. Luxury oils and gemstones were also imported from other regions through trade caravans protected by soldiers. To ensure the continuity of trade, the Old Kingdom established diplomatic relations with neighboring regions and sent commercial expeditions to distant lands. Some of these journeys were documented in hieroglyphic inscriptions, such as the expedition of Khufu to the land of Punt, possibly present-day Somalia, which brought back large quantities of incense, myrrh, and rare woods. Additionally, royal warehouses played a crucial role in trade management, where goods were stored before being distributed to temples or used in massive construction projects like the pyramids. Scribes were responsible for recording incoming and outgoing quantities, indicating the existence of an advanced administrative system regulating trade operations. Thus, it can be said that the trade mechanisms of the Old Kingdom relied on a delicate balance between local resources and foreign relations, with optimal exploitation of Egypt's strategic geographical location. This trade helped solidify Egypt's position as a major economic power in the ancient world. Since the dawn of early civilizations, the state has played a central role in regulating labor and trade, with its economic laws and systems reflecting the nature of the relationship between rulers and subjects, as well as between producers and consumers. In ancient societies such as Pharaonic Egypt and Mesopotamia, the state directly intervened in labor distribution and the pricing of essential goods, ensuring relative economic and social stability. In Pharaonic Egypt, for example, the state controlled the country's resources through a strict centralized system, overseeing massive construction projects like pyramids and temples, which required the mobilization of thousands of workers and peasants during low agricultural seasons. These projects were managed through a complex bureaucracy that ensured workers were provided with food and shelter, while also determining agricultural production quotas and storing surplus in state granaries for use during droughts or distribution to officials and soldiers. In Mesopotamia, some of the earliest written laws regulating labor and trade emerged, such as the Code of Hammurabi, which fixed prices for various goods and services, set workers' wages, and imposed penalties on violators. These laws aimed to protect the poor from exploitation while reinforcing state control over economic activity. As civilizations advanced, new patterns of economic regulation emerged. In the Roman Empire, for instance, a guild system was established to organize artisans and merchants, with these guilds subject to state supervision and required to pay special taxes. Rome also imposed strict laws on grain trade to ensure food supply for the capital's population, leading to the creation of a distribution system known as the annona, which guaranteed the flow of subsidized essential goods. During the Middle Ages, the power of the central state in Europe weakened in favor of feudal lords, but the church played a regulatory role in setting just prices and morally acceptable wages. With the Renaissance and the beginning of commercial expansion, the state regained a stronger role in regulating markets through customs duties and granting trade privileges to companies like the British and Dutch East India Companies, which operated under government protection. In the modern era, state tools for regulating labor and trade evolved unprecedentedly. After the Industrial Revolution, labor laws emerged to limit working hours and prohibit child labor, while states imposed tariffs to protect domestic industries. In the 20th century, with the rise of socialist systems, the state took full control of production and distribution, while capitalist countries adopted mixed economies combining free markets with state intervention to ensure social justice. Thus, it becomes clear that throughout history, the state has been a fundamental player in shaping labor and trade patterns, whether through direct legislation or regulatory bodies, profoundly influencing the development of societies and global economies. Taxation in the Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt. The Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt, spanning from approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, was a period marked by the consolidation of state power, monumental architecture, and a highly centralized administration. At the heart of this administration was the taxation system, which played a crucial role in sustaining the kingdom's economy, funding grand construction projects, and maintaining the vast bureaucracy. Taxation in the Old Kingdom was not merely an economic tool but also a reflection of the pharaoh's divine authority, ensuring that resources were efficiently collected and redistributed to uphold Ma'at, the cosmic order of balance and justice. The foundations of taxation in the Old Kingdom. The taxation system of the Old Kingdom was deeply intertwined with the agricultural cycle, as Egypt's economy was predominantly agrarian. The annual flooding of the Nile, which deposited fertile silt across the land, dictated the rhythm of life and, consequently, the timing of tax collection. The state relied heavily on the produce of the land, and taxes were primarily levied in the form of agricultural goods rather than currency, which was not yet in widespread use. The pharaoh, as the supreme ruler and earthly representative of the gods, was theoretically the owner of all land. However, in practice, land was held by temples, nobles, and regional administrators, nomarchs, who managed estates on behalf of the crown. These officials were responsible for ensuring that taxes were collected from the farmers and laborers who worked the land. The central government maintained meticulous records of land ownership and expected yields, allowing for an organized and systematic approach to taxation. Methods of tax collection. Tax collection in the Old Kingdom was a well-structured process overseen by a class of scribes who played a pivotal role in the administration. These scribes recorded harvests, calculated expected yields, and determined the amount of produce to be delivered to state granaries. The primary form of taxation was the shemsu, a compulsory contribution of grain, livestock, and other agricultural products. Granaries served as the backbone of the taxation system, functioning as state warehouses where collected goods were stored and later redistributed. The surplus grain was used to feed laborers working on royal projects, sustain the priesthood, and provide rations for the army and government officials. In times of famine, these reserves were also crucial for ensuring the population's survival, reinforcing the pharaoh's role as the provider and protector of the people. In addition to agricultural taxes, labor obligations were another critical aspect of the taxation system. Corvée labor, a form of unpaid, compulsory service, was required for public works, most notably the construction of pyramids, temples, and irrigation systems. Farmers, during the inundation season when the fields were flooded, were often drafted into labor forces to contribute to these monumental projects. This system ensured that the state had a steady workforce without needing to pay wages, As labor was considered a form of tax owed to the king, administration and enforcement, the efficiency of the Old Kingdom's taxation system relied on a well-organized bureaucracy. At the top of this hierarchy was the vizier, the pharaoh's chief minister, who oversaw tax collection and resource distribution. Beneath the vizier were regional governors, nomarchs, who managed their respective provinces, nomes, and ensured that taxes were collected and delivered to the capital. Scribes, trained in record-keeping and mathematics, were indispensable in this process. They conducted regular censuses of people, livestock, and land to assess taxable wealth. Tax exemptions were rare but could be granted to temples or favored nobles as a reward for loyalty or service. Failure to pay taxes could result in punishments ranging from increased labor duties to confiscation of property, though evidence suggests that the state often sought to maintain stability rather than impose harsh penalties. Economic and social implications. The taxation system of the Old Kingdom was not merely an economic mechanism but also a tool for reinforcing social hierarchy. The pharaoh, as the divine ruler, justified taxation as a divine mandate, ensuring that the gods were honored and the kingdom prospered. The redistribution of collected goods helped maintain social order, as the state provided for priests, artisans, and laborers who contributed to religious and state projects. However, the heavy reliance on agricultural taxes and labor obligations also had its drawbacks. In periods of low Nile floods or poor harvests, the tax burden could become oppressive, leading to unrest. Some historians argue that the decline of the Old Kingdom was partly due to administrative inefficiencies and the overextension of resources, including excessive taxation to fund massive construction projects like the pyramids. The taxation system of the Old Kingdom was a sophisticated and integral part of ancient Egyptian governance, enabling the state to mobilize resources, sustain its population, and construct some of history's most enduring monuments. Rooted in agriculture and labor, it reflected the pharaoh's divine authority while supporting the kingdom's economic and social structures. Though the system was not without flaws, its efficiency and organization were remarkable for its time, laying the groundwork for subsequent administrative developments in Egyptian history.